I'm Maxwell Sterling. I'm 32 years old, and one Sunday night, I discovered my entire family was hosting a party in my building to divide it up and claim it as their own. Before I tell you how my lawyer and security team crashed that party and served them with trespassing notices, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always incredible to see how far these stories reach. It all started, as these things often do, with the buzz of a phone. It wasn't a loud, intrusive ring, but a persistent vibration on the polished surface of my nightstand. It was just after 10 p.m. on a Sunday. I was winding down, reviewing some market analytics for the week ahead, the city lights twinkling through my apartment window. Sunday nights for me were quiet. Time to reset. But this buzz was different. It was from my cousin, Chloe. We weren't exceptionally close, but we were the youngest cousins on my mom's side, and we shared a certain unspoken alliance against the louder, more demanding personalities in our family. She never called this late. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I answered, expecting bad news, a health emergency, an accident. What I got was worse. Max. Her voice was a frantic whisper. I could see her face on the video call, grainy and shadowed. She was hiding in a pantry, surrounded by shelves of canned goods. Max, you need to see this. I am so sorry. Chloe, what's wrong? Where are you? I'm at your building. 842 Sterling Lofts, she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. They're all here. Your mom, your dad, Leo, Clara, everyone. They called it a surprise family dinner. My blood ran cold. I hadn't planned any dinner. What are you talking about? I'm at my place. I know, she said, her voice cracking. That's the problem. She flipped her camera. It was shaky, but I could see the familiar marble countertop of the communal kitchen in my building's penthouse, the one I lived in. Then she aimed the phone through a crack in the pantry door. I could hear my mother's voice, clear and commanding, booming with the authority she always assumed. It's settled then, she declared to a chorus of agreeable murmurs. Leo, you get the third floor. That corner unit has the best light for your new art studio. My brother, Leo, the golden boy, of course. Another voice, my sister Clara's, chimed in. And the second floor is perfect for me and the kids, so close to the street entrance. We'll need 3 of the parking spaces, Mom, for the minivan and visitors. A wave of nausea hit me. Parking spaces. They were assigning parking spaces. Then my father, Richard, spoke, his voice laced with the dismissive tone he always used when talking about me. Max doesn't drive much anyway. He can have the compact space in the back. It's only fair. Family assets are family assets. Family assets. The words echoed in my head. I gripped the phone, my throat too tight to speak. Chloe flipped the camera back to her face, tears welling in her eyes. They think you're out of town, she mouthed silently. They're planning to move in next weekend. Max, what do? I couldn't answer. My mind was a vortex of shock and white-hot rage. I ended the call without a word, staring at the black screen of my phone. The city lights outside blurred into a meaningless smear. My family, my own mother, father, brother, and sister were in my building, carving up my life's work like a Thanksgiving turkey. And at that moment, as the betrayal settled deep into my bones, the entire story of how we got here flashed before my eyes, piece by painful piece. To understand why they thought they could do this, you have to understand my family. And to understand my family, you have to understand my brother, Leo. Leo was born with a spotlight on him. He was 2 years older, and from the moment he could walk, he was the star of the Sterling family show. He was athletic, charming, and effortlessly popular. Our family photo albums are a testament to his glory. There's Leo hitting the winning home run in Little League, my father beaming behind him. There's Leo crowned from king, my mother adjusting his paper crown as if it were made of solid gold. I was the other one, the quiet one, the one with his nose in a book or, worse, glued to a computer screen. While Leo was collecting trophies, I was collecting spare computer parts from junkyards. While he was learning to throw a perfect spiral, I was learning to write code. I remember one Thanksgiving vividly. I was about 15. I'd spent months building a simple software program that could organize and track sports statistics. I was so proud of it. I tried to show my dad, thinking he, a massive sports fan, would be impressed. He glanced at the screen for maybe 3 seconds. Lines of green text flickered on the black background. He grunted. "Looks complicated, Max." He then turned to the living room where Leo was effortlessly recounting some story about a football game. "Leo," my dad boomed, a huge smile on his face. "Tell everyone about that final play again." The room erupted in laughter and applause. I just stood there, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face, feeling completely invisible. My project, my passion, was just complicated. Leo's recycled story was headline news. It wasn't just neglect. It was active discouragement. My parents saw my interest in technology as a weird, antisocial hobby. "You should be outside, getting fresh air like your brother," my mother would say, even as I was building the foundations of my entire future in that dimly lit bedroom. They talked about Leo's future with certainty. He was destined for a big promotion at his sales job, a corner office, a hefty salary. They even had a special account earmarked as his business starter fund, something that was never ever mentioned for me. My future, in their eyes, was a blurry, uncertain thing. This dynamic created a clear hierarchy. Leo's needs were priorities. My needs were afterthoughts. When he wanted a new car for his 18th birthday, they dipped into their savings without a second thought. When I asked for a new processor for my computer, something that cost a fraction of the car, I was given a lecture on the value of money and told to get a part-time job, which I did. I wasn't jealous of Leo's popularity. I was starving for a fraction of the validation he received for simply existing. I craved for one of my parents to look at what I was creating and see potential, not a problem. But they never did. To them, Leo was the safe bet, the thoroughbred. I was the strange, scrawny horse in the corner they didn't know what to do with. And that core belief that I was somehow less deserving, is exactly what allowed them to stand in my building years later and truly believe, that what was mine was rightfully theirs. They never saw my success as something I earned. They would only ever see it as an anomaly, a fluke that they were entitled to correct. The gap between their perception of me and my own ambition only widened after college. Leo landed a flashy sales job with a company car and an expense account right out of school. He was living the life my parents had always envisioned for him. I, on the other hand, went a different route. I had an idea, a big one, for a specialized data analytics software that could streamline logistics for shipping companies. I knew it had potential, but it was just an idea, and ideas don't pay rent. I spent a year working a soul-crushing IT job, saving every penny. I wrote my business plan at night, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning desire to prove everyone wrong. When I was finally ready to launch my own small consulting firm, I was just short of the seed money I needed for servers and basic licensing. I had explored every option, but my personal credit was thin. So, I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I asked my parents for a loan. I prepared a full presentation. I had charts, projections, a detailed breakdown of costs. I treated it like a formal pitch to investors. I sat them down in their living room, the same room where my achievements had always gone to die. My father leaned back in his armchair, arms crossed, a skeptical look on his face. My mother just wrung her hands. Leo was there, too, looking on with an air of amused pity. I finished my pitch, my heart pounding. Silence. Finally, my father spoke. "Max, this all sounds very technical. It sounds risky. Look at your brother. Steady job, good salary, benefits. That's security." "This isn't about security, Dad," I argued, my voice tight. "It's about building something. This is a real opportunity." It was my mother who finally relented, not out of faith in my venture, but out of a sense of familial obligation. "Richard, he's our son," she said quietly. "We can't just let him fail." The words were meant to be supportive, but they felt like a punch to the gut. Let him fail. They had already decided the outcome. They agreed to lend me $20,000. It wasn't a gift. It was a formal loan, and they made sure I knew it. But it came with invisible strings. That $20,000 became a shackle. Every family dinner, every holiday, it would come up. "How's that little computer business of yours, Max?" My father would ask, a little too loudly. "Hope you're being careful with our money." My mother would chime in with, "We're just so glad we could help you out. You know, family has to support each other." The unspoken message was clear. You owe us. You are indebted to us. Your success, if it ever comes, is built on our generosity. I worked like a man possessed. I poured every waking hour into my company. Within 18 months, through a combination of sheer grit and a couple of key contracts, I had made enough to pay them back in full with interest. I remember the day I transferred the money. I felt a profound sense of relief, of liberation. I went to their house that Sunday for dinner, expecting some acknowledgement, maybe even a hint of pride. I told them I had sent the payment. My dad just shrugged. "Good. Glad to see it didn't go to waste." My mother smiled faintly. "That's nice, dear. Now, Leo was just telling us he's up for a big promotion." And just like that, it was over. My monumental effort, my first real taste of success, was a footnote. They cashed the check, but in their minds, the debt was never truly repaid. That $20,000 loan in their story wasn't a business transaction. It was the cornerstone of my entire empire. It was the leverage they believed they would hold over me forever. Fast forward a few years. My software company wasn't just a little computer business anymore. It was thriving. I had sold the initial software patent for a sum that would have shocked my family into silence. But I never told them the details. I saw no point. They would have either not believed me or, worse, found a way to claim credit for it. Instead, I took that capital and quietly started investing in real estate. It was tangible, something I could see and build. My first major purchase was an old, 4-story commercial building in a rapidly developing part of the city. 842 sterling lofts. It was my masterpiece. I spent a year renovating it, turning the upper floors into high-end residential lofts and keeping the ground floor for commercial space. The penthouse on the 4th floor? That was for me. It was more than a home. It was a symbol that the quiet kid in the bedroom had finally built something real. About a year before that fateful Sunday dinner, I had to have minor knee surgery. It was an old sports injury. Ironic, I know, that finally needed fixing. The recovery was straightforward, but for the first week, I was laid up and couldn't get around easily. My mother, Eleanor, insisted on helping. Her version of helping was to descend upon my life with the subtlety of a hurricane. She'd rearrange my kitchen, question my diet, and provide a running commentary on how I should be living my life. It was exhausting, but I was in a vulnerable position. On her second day there, she held up my keys. "Maxwell, this is ridiculous," she said. "What if there's an emergency? What if you fall and I can't get in? I need a key." "Mom, the building has a front desk with a security guard. David, the building manager, has a master key. I'll be fine." "David isn't family," she insisted, her voice rising with manufactured panic. "What if the power goes out? What if the phones are down? A mother needs to be able to get to her son. It's just for emergencies, Maxwell. For my peace of mind." She was relentless. She played on my guilt, my fatigue from the surgery, and that small, stupid part of me that still wanted her approval. After an hour of her incessant lobbying, I caved. I was tired. It seemed like a small price to pay for some quiet. I gave her a spare key to my penthouse apartment. A key that, I now realized, also granted access to the building's main entrance via a fob. "Thank you, darling," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness as she dropped the key into her purse. "You won't even know I have it. It's just for a true emergency." I didn't think much of it after that. I recovered, she eventually left, and life went on. The key faded into the back of my mind, a forgotten concession made in a moment of weakness. Now, sitting in the dark with my phone screen illuminating my grim face, the memory of that moment came crashing back. The feigned concern, the manufactured crisis. It wasn't about an emergency. It was never about my safety. It was about access. It was about control. She had wanted a foothold in my world, a way to cross the boundaries I had so carefully constructed. And I, in a moment of weakness, had handed it right to her. That key wasn't an emergency tool. It was a weapon waiting to be used. And that Sunday night, she was using it to lead an invasion. The initial shock, that paralyzing wave of disbelief and betrayal, lasted for exactly 90 seconds. Then, something inside me shifted. The hurt didn't vanish, but it crystallized into something cold, hard, and sharp. Resolve. The boy who craved their approval was gone. In his place was the man who owned the building they were currently trespassing in. I stood up and walked to my home office. There would be no screaming matches, no desperate, tearful phone calls. They had escalated this from a family drama to a business matter, a legal matter, and I would respond in kind. I had 2 numbers on speed dial for situations like this. These were the people who protected my assets, the architects of the quiet, successful life I had built for myself. The first call was to Julian Vance. Julian was my real estate lawyer, a man who operated with the precision of a surgeon. He was expensive, ruthless in court, and worth every single penny. He answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and alert even at this late hour. "Maxwell, I hope this is good news." "Not exactly," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "Julian, I have a situation at 842 Sterling Lofts. An unauthorized entry and occupation. A large group of people. Have you called the police?" "Not yet. It's complicated. It's my family." There was a brief pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his brilliant legal mind. He didn't offer condolences or ask about my feelings. He asked the right questions. "Are they armed? Are they damaging the property?" "No, they're celebrating. They're dividing up the units amongst themselves. They believe they have a right to be there." "And do they?" "Absolutely not," I said. "The property is held under my development corporation, of which I am the sole owner. There are no other names on the deed." "Good," Julian said, his voice now firm, all business. "Don't contact them. Don't answer any calls or texts. Let them feel secure. What's the address again?" "I'll meet you there in 1 hour. I'll bring the necessary paperwork to have them removed for trespassing. We'll also need a security presence." That led to my second call. David Chun, my building manager. David was a former military police officer, a man who valued order and loyalty above all else. He was fiercely protective of my properties. "David, it's Max. We have a Code 4 at the Sterling Lofts." Code 4 was our shorthand for a serious breach. "I'm 5 minutes away," he said instantly. No questions asked. "What do I need to know?" "Multiple unauthorized individuals in the penthouse and likely other floors. They were let in by my mother." I felt a fresh stab of bitterness as I said the words. "My lawyer, Julian Vance, is en route. We need to secure the building. I want your best security team there. Discreet, professional, but ready to escort people off the premises." "Understood," David said. "Sentinel Property Services is on it. They'll meet us there. We'll wait for you and the lawyer at the cafe across the street. Don't enter the building alone." I hung up the phone. My hands were perfectly steady. My mind was clear. For years, I had built firewalls, emotional, financial, and physical, to protect myself from the chaos of my family. Tonight, they had breached the outer wall, and they were about to discover just how formidable the inner defenses were. This wasn't going to be a messy family argument. This was going to be a clean, swift, and legal eviction. While I was getting dressed, putting on a sharp, dark suit that felt more like armor than clothing, my phone buzzed again. It was David. "Max, I'm on site, monitoring from my car. I've accessed the lobby security feed from the last few hours. You're not going to like this. Tell me, your mother didn't just use her key to get in tonight," he said, his voice grim. "I've been scrubbing the footage from the past few months, running facial recognition on entries flagged as non-resident. She's been here before, 3 times to be exact. Always midday, during the week, when she knew you'd be at your downtown office." The icy resolve in my veins felt like it was freezing solid. What was she doing? The first 2 times, she just came into the lobby, looked around, and left. Casing the joint, it looks like. But the third time, about 6 weeks ago, she met someone. He paused. She met a man in the lobby. They spoke for a few minutes. Then she handed him something. Looked like a key. He went outside and she went up to the penthouse for about an hour. The man returned 20 minutes later and left. I knew, with a sickening certainty, what had happened. David checked the external cameras. Is there a locksmith van? A key-cutting service nearby. Took him less than a minute. Got it. Rapid lock and key. A van was parked a block away. The man she met came from that direction and went back to it. Max, I think she didn't just use her emergency key. I think she had copies made. This was twist number 1. This was the moment that erased any lingering shred of doubt, any microscopic particle of sentimentality I might have had left. This wasn't a spontaneous act of entitlement. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision born from a warped sense of family. This was premeditated. My mother, Eleanor Sterling, had carefully and deliberately planned this invasion. The visits to scout the building. The hiring of a locksmith to duplicate the key I had given her in a moment of vulnerability. This had been in the works for months. The surprise family dinner was just the execution of a long-conceived plot. I thought about her feigned concern after my surgery. Her pleas for a key, for my peace of mind. It was all a lie, a calculated performance to gain access. She had played the part of the loving, worried mother to perfection, all while planning to betray me in the most profound way possible. Thank you, David, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That information is very valuable. I'm on my way. I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The face looking back wasn't angry anymore. It was something else. It was the face of a man who had been pushed past the breaking point and had come out the other side, forged into something harder. The idea of a messy confrontation, of shouting and tears, now seemed absurd. You don't argue with a thief. You have them arrested. You don't plead with an invader. You have them removed. My family, led by my own mother, had acted with criminal intent. My response would be proportionate. The compassion was gone. The family discount had expired. All that was left was the cold, hard math of the law. And the law was on my side. The cafe across the street from my building was dimly lit and smelled of stale coffee. It was the perfect, anonymous place for a council of war. Julian was already there, seated in a corner booth. A leather briefcase sat on the table in front of him. He looked calm, composed, like a man about to go into a routine board meeting. David stood by the window, a sentinel watching my building, his presence a silent promise of security. I slid into the booth opposite Julian. He nodded at me, a flicker of something that might have been sympathy in his sharp eyes, but his voice was all business. Okay, Maxwell, here's the situation. He opened his briefcase and laid out a single, crisp document. This is a formal notice to vacate and cease trespass. It names your mother, Eleanor Sterling, as the primary recipient, as she was the one who facilitated entry, along with all other unauthorized occupants. It clearly states that 842 Sterling Lofts is private property owned by Apex Property Development, that they have no legal right to be on the premises, and that failure to vacate immediately will result in law enforcement being called and charges being pressed. He tapped the paper. This is our legal standing. It's ironclad. David turned from the window. My team is in position. 2 men at the front entrance, 2 covering the back. All wearing plain clothes, no uniforms. They will not engage unless you or Julian give the signal. We want to de-escalate, not provoke. I nodded, appreciating their professionalism. What's the plan of action? Julian laid it out. We have 2 options. Option A, the shock and awe approach. We call the police right now, have them meet us there, and let them handle the eviction. It's fast, it's messy, and it will almost certainly end with your family members in handcuffs. It will also be very public. He let that sink in before continuing. Option B, the surgical strike. You, me, and David's team go in. We present the notice. I explain the legal reality of the situation, the criminal charges they are facing, the potential for a civil suit for damages. We give them one chance and one chance only to leave under their own power peacefully. If they refuse, we signal the team and then we call the police. It's quieter, it gives you control of the narrative, and it offers them a single off-ramp before this becomes a life-altering mistake for them. He leaned forward slightly. But you have to be prepared for them to call your bluff. I didn't even have to think about it. For a moment, I pictured my mother being led out in handcuffs. The image gave me a grim, fleeting sense of satisfaction. But it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to stop them. I wanted to draw a line so thick and so permanent that they would never, ever dare to cross it again. I wanted them to see unequivocally that the game was over. Option B, I said, my voice firm. We go in. We give them the choice. But Julian, when you explain the consequences, I want you to be crystal clear. No sugarcoating. I want them to understand the full weight of what they've done, and the full extent of the legal trouble I can bring down on them if I choose to. I also thought about the other people in that building, the legitimate tenants on the second and third floors. A public, messy scene with police cars wasn't fair to them. I had a responsibility as a landlord. Julian nodded, a thin smile on his lips. I can be very clear, Maxwell. I will paint them a picture so vivid it will give them nightmares. David gave a curt nod. The team is ready on your signal. I took a deep breath. This was it. The final decision. There was no turning back from this. Walking into that building tonight would change my relationship with my family forever. But then I realized, with a clarity that was almost painful, that they had already made that change. I wasn't severing a bond. I was acknowledging it had already been severed by them. Let's go, I said, standing up. It's time to end this. We walked out of the cafe and across the street, the three of us moving with a shared purpose. The lights of the penthouse glowed against the dark sky. The party was still in full swing, but the guests of honor were about to arrive. We didn't drive, we walked. It was only a block from my condo to the lofts, a short, cold walk under the city streetlights. The air was crisp, and the silence between the three of us, myself, Julian, and David, was heavy with anticipation. Every step on the pavement felt deliberate, final. My phone, which I had silenced, lit up in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen was a cascade of notifications from the family group chat, the one Chloe had shown me. I couldn't resist opening it. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. There were pictures, selfies of my sister Clara and her kids posing in what was supposed to be their new living room. A picture of Leo, my brother, standing on a balcony with his arms outstretched, a triumphant look on his face, with the caption, "The new king of Sterling Lofts." The messages were even worse. My Aunt Carol, a woman who always spoke in a syrupy sweet tone, had written, "It's just wonderful that you're all coming together to manage this big asset for Maxwell. He's a smart boy, but a building is too much for one person to handle." My father had replied, "He was lucky to get it in the first place. This is just balancing the scales." Balancing the scales. The phrase made my stomach churn. In their narrative, my success was an injustice. My hard-earned property was something they were entitled to, a family inheritance I had somehow received prematurely. They weren't stealing. In their minds, they were performing a righteous act of redistribution. I scrolled further, my thumb moving numbly over the screen. Leo had posted a message that made my blood boil. "Don't worry, everyone. I'll make sure Max gets a fair allowance from the rental income. He can keep playing with his little computer games." That was the line that sealed it. The casual, public emasculation. The complete and utter dismissal of the very work that had paid for every brick and window of the building they were standing in. They didn't just want my property. They wanted to humiliate me, to put me back in the box they had created for me. The weird, unsuccessful little brother. I turned off the screen and put the phone back in my pocket. The anger wasn't hot anymore. It was a cold, dense weight in my chest. These messages were a gift. They were the final pieces of evidence I needed, not for a court of law, but for the court of my own conscience. Any lingering doubt, any thought of reconciliation, evaporated. As we reached the front steps of 842 Sterling Lofts, I paused. David's security team, 2 men in discreet dark jackets, gave us a subtle nod from across the street. Julian adjusted his tie. David's hand rested near his phone, ready to signal the rest of his team. I looked up at the penthouse window. I could see the silhouettes of people moving around, laughing, oblivious. They were celebrating their victory. But I knew something they didn't. The real power wasn't in that penthouse. It was standing right here, on the sidewalk, holding a briefcase full of legal documents. And we were about to walk through the front door. The lobby of 842 Sterling Lofts was my creation. I had overseen every detail, from the cool, veined marble under our feet to the warm, recessed lighting in the ceiling. It was designed to be a sanctuary, a quiet, elegant space that welcomed residents home. Tonight, it felt like the staging ground for a battle. David used his master key fob to let us in. The night shift concierge, a young man named Ben, looked up from his desk, his eyes widening in surprise. He knew I rarely came in this late. David walked over to him, speaking in a low, calm voice. "Ben, everything is fine. Mr. Sterling is here with his legal counsel to handle a private matter upstairs. We need you to not allow anyone else up to the penthouse, and please do not announce our arrival." Ben, a consummate professional, simply nodded. "Understood, Mr. Chun." We crossed the lobby to the private elevator that led directly to the penthouse. It was operated by a specific key, the very key my mother had copied. My own key. As I inserted it, the irony was thick enough to choke on. The security measure I had installed for my own privacy was now the tool I was using to reclaim it. The elevator doors slid shut, encasing the 3 of us in a small, silent box. The ride up felt agonizingly slow. The only sound was the soft hum of the machinery. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, a steady, heavy drumbeat. This was the point of no return. Julian glanced at me. "Are you ready for this, Maxwell?" I thought about the years of being dismissed. I thought about my father's grunt of disapproval, Leo's smug superiority, my mother's manipulative concern. I thought about the text messages on my phone, the casual carving up of my life's work. Was I ready? I had been preparing for this moment my entire life. "I'm ready," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was deeper, harder. The voice of a different man than the one who had woken up that morning. The elevator slowed, and the soft chime indicating our arrival on the 4th floor echoed in the small space. I met Julian's eyes, then David's. We shared a silent nod of understanding. The doors slid open. The scene before us was one of surreal domestic desecration. The sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and loud music flooded the elevator. My minimalist, carefully curated living space had been transformed into a chaotic family reunion. There were at least 15 people there. My uncles, aunts, cousins. Clara's kids were chasing each other around my custom-made sofa. My Uncle Robert was holding one of my expensive art books, his greasy fingers leaving marks on the glossy pages. And in the center of it all, standing by the massive kitchen island with a glass of my best wine in her hand, was my mother. She was glowing, holding court, the triumphant matriarch. She saw us first. A brilliant smile lit up her face. She had no idea who Julian and David were. She just saw me. "Maxwell!" she exclaimed, her voice ringing out over the noise. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to us. Perfect timing. We were just finishing the space assignments. Come, your father and I saved the best view for ourselves. But we left you a lovely spot by the laundry room." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. The music seemed to vanish. The laughter died in people's throats. 15 pairs of eyes were locked on me, Julian and David, standing in the entryway of the open elevator. My mother's smile was frozen on her face, a grotesque mask of oblivious triumph. Her words hung in the air, thick and unbelievable. "We left you a lovely spot by the laundry room." I took a slow step forward, out of the elevator and into my home. David and Julian followed, flanking me like Secret Service agents. I let my gaze sweep across the room, making eye contact with each person. My sister Clara, who quickly herded her kids behind her. My brother Leo, whose smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. My father, who narrowed his eyes, sensing a challenge to his authority. And finally, my mother. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I spoke into the dead silence, my words precise and cold as ice. The party's over. A nervous titter went through the crowd. My Uncle Robert tried to break the tension. Hey now, Max, is that any way to greet your family? We're just celebrating your success. This isn't a celebration, I said, my eyes still locked on my mother. This is a home invasion, and it ends now. My father, Richard, stepped forward, his face turning red. He had always relied on bluster and intimidation. Don't you take that tone with us, young man. We are your family. We are here to help you manage this place. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word came out as a dry, humorless rasp. Grateful that you broke into my home? Grateful that you used a key I gave my mother in good faith to plan a hostile takeover of my property. My mother finally found her voice, though it was shakier now. The brilliant smile was gone. Maxwell, don't be so dramatic. We're just organizing. This building belongs to the family. No, I said, taking another step forward. The crowd instinctively parted before me. This building belongs to Apex Property Development, and I am Apex Property Development. I turned to Julian. Mr. Vance, if you would. Julian stepped forward, calm and authoritative. He held up the legal document. Good evening. My name is Julian Vance. I am legal counsel for Mr. Maxwell Sterling and his corporation. I am here to serve this notice. He placed the document firmly on the marble island in front of my mother. This is a formal notice to cease trespassing. You are all on this property illegally. You have 5 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. The room erupted. Lawyer? My father bellowed, his voice cracking with disbelief and fury. You brought a lawyer to a family dinner? This isn't a family dinner, Julian stated calmly, not even flinching at my father's outburst. This is an illegal occupation of a private residence. My father jabbed a finger in my direction, his face contorted with rage. This is his residence because of US. We gave him the money to get started. That $20,000 loan. That's what built all this. This is family money. The room murmured in agreement. This was their central belief. This was the foundation of their entitlement. They had bought their ticket to my life for a mere $20,000. I was about to respond, to tell them how I had paid it back years ago, but Julian raised a hand, silencing me. He had been waiting for this exact moment. This was his stage. Mr. Sterling, Julian said, addressing my father with a voice that cut through the noise like a scalpel. I'm glad you brought that up. I've taken the liberty of reviewing my client's financial history. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another file. The $20,000 loan you are referring to was repaid in full, with a 2% contractual interest on April 17th, 3 years ago. A bank transfer confirmation was sent to your email. So, let's be very clear. You have no financial stake in my client's business. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked stunned. But Julian wasn't finished. This was the main event. This was the twist that would shatter their entire reality. You seem to be under the impression, Julian continued, his voice resonating with power, that Mr. Maxwell's success is a minor, lucky affair built on your generosity. The truth is somewhat different. He paused, letting the suspense build. The seed money for Apex Property Development did not come from your loan. It came from the sale of a single software patent, a program called Kestrel Analytics, which my client developed and sold for $1.2 million. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her chest. Leo's face went completely white. Furthermore, Julian announced, his voice booming in the silent penthouse. This building, 842 Sterling Lofts, is not my client's only asset. It is merely one small piece of a commercial and residential real estate portfolio that is currently valued, as of this quarter, at $8.3 million. Total, utter, soul-shattering silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. The number just hung in the air, an impossible, alien figure. They stared at me, but they weren't seeing the weird, quiet kid anymore. They were seeing a stranger, a man of immense wealth and power that they had no idea existed. I saw the truth dawn on their faces. The shock, the awe, the dawning horror. They hadn't just misjudged me. They had made a catastrophic, multi-million-dollar miscalculation. And their faces, in that moment of stunned realization, were the only validation I would ever need. The spell of silence was broken by Leo. He let out a strange, choked laugh. No, no way. You're lying. He's lying. Max, tell them it's a lie. He was looking at me, his eyes wide and desperate. He wasn't seeing a brother. He was seeing his last-ditch hope for a bailout. I stepped forward, and for the first time that night, I addressed him directly. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of the truth. It's not a lie, Leo, I said, and then I delivered the second, more personal twist. And I also know that your thriving import-export business is on the verge of bankruptcy. I know you're 6 figures in debt to your suppliers and you just defaulted on a business loan. This wasn't about family assets. This was about you needing a lifeline. You weren't trying to manage my property. You were trying to liquidate it to save yourself. The color drained completely from Leo's face. His wife, standing beside him, let out a small, horrified gasp. The Golden Boy's facade had just been publicly stripped away, layer by painful layer. He was exposed. That's when my mother started to cry. Not the soft, gentle tears of remorse, but the loud, heaving sobs of a thwarted narcissist. How could you? She wailed, pointing a trembling finger at me. How could you do this to your own family? After everything we've done for you, we gave you life. We supported you. This is how you repay us? With lawyers and threats? You have so much. Why can't you just share? Share. I repeated, the word tasting like poison. You call this sharing? Breaking into my home? Conspiring behind my back? Lying to my face for months? I looked around the room, at all the relatives who had stood by and watched, eager for their piece of the pie. A family doesn't do this. A family doesn't break into each other's buildings and assign themselves apartments. Julian glanced at his watch. Your 5 minutes are up. That was the signal. David spoke quietly into his phone. A moment later, 2 more of his security team, big men in sharp but unassuming suits, stepped out of the second elevator. They didn't look menacing, but they radiated an aura of calm, unshakable authority. David addressed the room. His voice was polite but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, we now need you to collect your coats and purses and exit the building. Please do so in an orderly fashion. We will escort you out. Panic set in. My relatives, who had arrived feeling so powerful and entitled, now looked like cornered rats. They started grabbing their things, avoiding my eyes, muttering curses under their breath. The party was officially, irrevocably over. This is the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You are amazing. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 below, it lets me know you've been on this journey with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also shows me that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the single biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. My father gave me one last look of pure hatred. You will regret this, Maxwell. You have destroyed this family. No, Dad, I replied, my voice weary but certain. You all destroyed it. I'm just the one who finally turned on the lights. One by one, they filed out, escorted by David's men. The victorious invaders were now a sad, defeated procession of shame. The last to leave was my mother. She paused at the door, her face tear-streaked and crumpled. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for one last chance, one last emotional hook to sink into me. I just looked back, my expression blank. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked away. The door closed behind her, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, there was silence in my home. The silence they left behind was vast and deafening. The penthouse, which had been filled with so much noise and arrogant laughter just minutes before, was now a hollow, echoing space. It was a mess. Half-eaten plates of food were left on the counters. Wine glasses were abandoned on expensive furniture, and a few of Clara's kids' toys were strewn across my favorite rug. It looked like the aftermath of a storm. David, Julian, and I stood in the middle of the living room. The adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins began to subside, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I had won. I had defended my territory, asserted my power, and drawn the ultimate boundary. But it didn't feel like a victory. Felt like a funeral. The funeral for the idea of a family I had always wanted but never truly had. "Well," Julian said, breaking the silence as he packed his briefcase. "I'd say that went as well as could be expected. They're shaken. They know you're not bluffing." He placed a business card on the clean part of the counter. "Call me tomorrow. They might try to contact you. It's best if all communication goes through me from now on." I nodded, unable to form words. "I've already called the locksmiths," David said, his practical nature a welcome anchor in the emotional tempest. "Sentinel's best guys. They'll be here in 20 minutes. We're not just rekeying the penthouse. We're changing every single lock in this building. All residences, all common areas, all service entrances. We're also upgrading the security software for the fobs. By morning, none of the old keys will work. Your mother's copied set will be nothing more than useless pieces of metal." He then looked around the messy room. "My team can have this cleaned up for you in an hour, max." "No," I said, finding my voice. "Thank you, David. But I think I need to do it myself." I needed a physical task. Something to focus on other than the gaping wound that had been torn open in my life. After Julian left, David and I did a final sweep of the building. His team was stationed discreetly in the lobby. The tenants on the other floors were none the wiser. The crisis had been contained, the invasion repelled with surgical precision. When the locksmiths arrived, I watched them work. The sound of drills and clicking mechanisms was strangely therapeutic. With every lock they replaced, I felt a sense of security being restored, not just to the building, but to me. They were sealing the breach, fortifying the walls. Each new key they handed me was a tangible symbol of my reclaimed control. By 3 a.m. they were done. David and his team had left. I was alone, truly alone, in my silent, secure fortress. I stood at the massive window, looking out at the sleeping city. I had everything I had ever worked for. I was successful, I was powerful, I was independent, and I had never felt more alone. The victory was mine, but the cost was a family. And in the quiet of that night, I had to face the question of whether it was a price worth paying. The answer, I knew, was yes, but it didn't make the pain go away. The silence in my apartment was a stark contrast to the storm that was erupting in the digital world. I knew it was a bad idea, but I couldn't help myself. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat one last time before leaving it for good. It was a bloodbath. The narrative had already been twisted into something unrecognizable. In their version of the story, I was the villain. I was a cold, cruel, ungrateful monster who had thrown his loving, supportive family out into the street. Clara, my sister, had written a long, rambling post full of self-pity. "I can't believe he would do this to my children. They were so excited to have a safe place to live, away from the custody battle with their father. My own brother, choosing his cold, empty building over his own niece and nephew. Some people let money rot their souls." Leo, ever the performer, was playing the part of the misunderstood martyr. "I was only trying to help him. The kid is brilliant, but he doesn't know how to manage people or assets. We were going to build a real family legacy here. But he chose to listen to some shark in a suit instead of his own blood. It's a tragedy." But the most vicious messages came from the extended family, the ones who had been hoping for a handout. My Aunt Carol, the syrupy sweet one, wrote, "Eleanor, My heart breaks for you. To have raised a son like that, it's every mother's worst nightmare. After all the sacrifices you made, all the money you gave him for that college fund he probably wasted. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. There was no college fund. Clara's custody battle was a fabrication to garner sympathy. Leo's help was a desperate attempt to avoid financial ruin. They were building a fortress of lies to protect their shattered egos. My father's message was short and brutal. He is no longer a son of mine. As far as I'm concerned, he's dead to this family. I read every word. I let the poison sink in. I saw how quickly they had united against me, how easily they could warp reality to fit their agenda. There was no remorse, no self-reflection, only rage and a burning sense of injustice that their plan had failed. I scrolled to the top of the chat, found my own name, and tapped Leave Group. A confirmation popped up. Are you sure you want to leave this group? It was the easiest decision I had made all night. I pressed Confirm. And just like that, I was digitally excommunicated. I had cut the final cord. The constant stream of toxic messages, the years of subtle digs and passive aggression, were gone. My phone fell silent. It was a strange feeling, a mix of profound sadness and an exhilarating sense of freedom. They could have their echo chamber. They could write their own history, cast me as the villain in their sad, pathetic story. It didn't matter anymore. I knew the truth, and I was the one living in the real world, not the fantasy of entitlement they had constructed. I was free, and that freedom, I realized, was worth more than a family built on lies. Time has a way of healing things, not by erasing the scars, but by giving you the space to grow around them. The 6 months that followed that night were some of the most peaceful and productive of my life. Without the constant drain of family drama, my focus became laser-sharp. I poured my energy into my work. 842 Sterling Lofts, once the scene of a painful battle, flourished. I secured a high-end gallery for the ground floor commercial space, and the residential lofts were fully leased to young professionals and artists who brought a vibrant, creative energy to the building. The property value shot up. It was no longer just a building. It was a thriving community. My real estate portfolio expanded. I acquired a fourth commercial property, a small office building downtown, and began renovating it. My consulting firm landed its biggest client to date, a project that was both challenging and incredibly rewarding. My life was moving forward, propelled by a momentum that felt unstoppable. I had no contact with my family. Julian handled a few initial, blustering calls from my father, which quickly stopped when Julian threatened him with a harassment suit. I changed my phone number and created new email addresses. The silence was a bomb. I reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted away from because I was always too busy managing my family's expectations. I started dating someone, a woman named Sarah who was an architect. She was brilliant, funny, and completely unimpressed by my net worth. She was impressed by my passion for building things, by the way my eyes lit up when I talked about a new project. For the first time, I was in a relationship where I felt seen for who I was, not for what I had. One afternoon, I was having lunch with Chloe, my cousin. She had become a good friend, a true ally. We met regularly, our own small, sane branch of the family tree. "You seem happy, Max," she said, smiling at me over her salad. "I am," I admitted, and the simplicity of the statement felt profound. "It's quiet. My life is mine." "You should know," she said, her tone becoming more serious. "They still talk about you. All the time. The story gets wilder every telling. Last I heard, you had hired a team of mercenaries and had them thrown out at gunpoint." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "Mercenaries? That's a new one. I'll have to tell Julian. He'll get a kick out of being called a mercenary. It's like they can't accept the reality of what happened," she said, shaking her head. "It's easier for them to believe you're some comic book villain than to admit they were wrong." I just shrugged. Let them talk. It doesn't affect me anymore. And the amazing thing was, it was true. Their words, their stories, they were just noise from a distant, fading world. I was busy building a new one. Just when I thought I had finally achieved a lasting peace, a thick manila envelope arrived at my office. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened for a moment, a phantom echo of the old anxiety. I opened it. Inside was a lawsuit. My mother, Eleanor, my father, Richard, and my brother Leo were suing me. I had to read it twice to believe it. They were claiming co-ownership of Apex Property Development and, by extension, my entire real estate portfolio. The basis of their claim? A supposed verbal family agreement that all my business ventures were to be considered joint family assets. They cited the $20,000 loan as proof of this agreement. They were demanding a controlling interest in my company and millions in punitive damages for emotional distress and breach of familial trust. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated absurdity. This was their final, desperate gamble. After the public humiliation, after the social media smearing, this was their Hail Mary pass. They were trying to use the legal system to achieve what their failed invasion could not. I immediately forwarded the documents to Julian. He called me within the hour, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. Maxwell, this is the most frivolous, poorly constructed lawsuit I have seen in my entire career, he said. It's an absolute joke. They have no evidence, no documentation, no case. A verbal agreement for a multi-million-dollar enterprise? A judge will laugh this out of court. So what do we do? I asked. What we do, Julian said, his voice turning steely, is we crush it. We file a motion to dismiss. And then we file a counterclaim for all our legal fees, forcing them to pay for this ridiculous stunt. We are going to make this so painful and so expensive for them that they never even think about trying something like this again. The legal process was swift. As Julian predicted, the judge dismissed their case at the very first hearing, calling it a baseless and opportunistic familial dispute. He didn't just dismiss it. He dismissed it with prejudice, meaning they could never file the same claim again. The best part? The judge granted our counterclaim. My mother, father, and brother were jointly ordered to pay my legal fees, which came to a total of $11,200. The irony was almost poetic. Their desperate, greedy lawsuit had cost them more than half of the original loan they had held over my head for so many years. They had tried to take millions and had ended up with nothing but a court-ordered bill and public confirmation of their own foolishness. It was a pathetic, self-inflicted end to their long and storied campaign of entitlement. It was the last nail in the coffin of our relationship, and I hadn't even had to hammer it in myself. They had done it all on their own. After the lawsuit imploded, a new kind of silence descended. It wasn't just the absence of contact. It was the silence of total and complete defeat. Their final weapon had been turned against them, and they had nothing left. I heard through Chloe that Leo's business had finally folded. He and his wife were going through a messy divorce, fighting over assets they didn't even have. My father had reportedly become withdrawn and bitter. My mother, for her part, was trying to save face by telling everyone she had dropped the lawsuit out of pity for me. No one believed her. I expected to feel a sense of triumph, of final victory. But mostly, I just felt a quiet sense of closure. The war was over. I could finally lower my defenses. A few weeks after the court ruling, a package arrived at my office. It was a small, square box with no return address. I was immediately suspicious. I had my assistant scan it before I opened it. It was safe. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small, healthy-looking bonsai tree. Underneath it was a simple, handwritten card. I recognized the familiar, slightly shaky handwriting immediately. It was from my Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben had been there that night at the penthouse. He was my father's younger, quieter brother. I remembered seeing him standing near the back, looking deeply uncomfortable, but he had never said a word. He had just filed out with the rest of them when asked to leave. I hadn't thought of him since. I opened the card. The message was short, just a few lines. Maxwell, it read. There's no excuse for what happened, and there's no excuse for my silence. I was a coward that night. I saw a wrong being done and I did nothing. I've been ashamed of that ever since. This is a small gesture, I know, but I wanted to tell you that I am truly sorry. I have always been proud of the man you became. Your uncle, Ben. I stared at the card for a long time. Of all the things I had expected to happen, this was not one of them. An apology. A genuine, unconditional apology. It was the one thing I had never received from my parents or siblings, the one thing I had given up hope of ever hearing. This was the final, unexpected twist in the story. It didn't erase the betrayal or heal all the wounds, but it was a crack of light in a wall of darkness. It was a reminder that the entire family hadn't been a lost cause. One of them had a conscience. One of them had the courage to admit fault. I placed the bonsai tree on my windowsill where it would get good light. It was a small, resilient thing, a symbol of life and patience. It didn't fix my family, but it did, in a small but significant way, restore a piece of my faith in the possibility of decency. It was a quiet, hopeful note on which to end the ugliest chapter of my life. And it was enough. It's been over a year now since that night. My life is fuller and more peaceful than I ever could have imagined. Sarah and I are talking about designing and building a house together from the ground up. My business continues to grow, now with 6 commercial buildings and a portfolio of residential properties. But my favorite is still 842 Sterling Lofts. It's more than just an asset. It's a monument to my own resilience. I don't work from the penthouse anymore. I have a corner office in one of my downtown buildings, with a panoramic view of the city skyline. And on the wall, right next to my college diploma and my first business license, is a simple black frame. Inside it isn't a picture or an award. It's the original deed of ownership for 842 Sterling Lofts. Some people might find it strange, framing a legal document. But to me, it's the most important piece of art I own. It's not about the money or the property value. It's a reminder. It's a reminder that ownership isn't just about a name on a piece of paper. It's about having the courage to claim your life, to set your boundaries, and to defend them, even if it means standing up to the very people who are supposed to love you. I haven't spoken to my parents, my brother, or my sister since that night. I hear snippets about them from time to time. Their lives are apparently filled with bitterness and regret, a sad cycle of blaming everyone but themselves for their problems. I don't feel anger towards them anymore. I just feel a distant, quiet pity. They had a chance at a real family connection, a real legacy, and they traded it all for a fantasy of unearned wealth. My family now is the one I've built. Sarah, my brilliant partner. It's my true friends who celebrate my successes without envy. It's my loyal employees and tenants. It's my cousin Chloe and my uncle Ben, with whom I have a quiet but meaningful relationship. Family, I've learned, isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about who shows up for you, who honors your boundaries, and who loves you for who you are, not for what you can give them. That framed deed on my wall is my declaration of independence. It reminds me every day that I am the architect of my own life, the sole owner of my own destiny. And that is a property that no one, no matter who they are, can ever take away from me again. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's not easy to talk about these things, but I feel it's important. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to draw a hard line with the people you love? I'd be honored to read your experience. Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next.